Hello, and today we have the wonderful privilege of being able to talk to Naomi Shihab, who is the author of The Turtle of Michigan, a 2023 Michigan notable book. And we're just so excited to delve in and get to know you a little bit better and more about your book. So I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you so much for having me, Mindy. I'm speaking from San Antonio, Texas, where it's been over 100 degrees for too many days in a row. We've all decided that we're pretty good up to 96 or 98, but when it goes up to 110, not so good. And our plants and trees have been very thirsty. I think of Michigan as a much cooler place, always greener, sweet in that way. And yeah, so we live in an old cottage in old downtown San Antonio near the river. And I have been writing all my life since I was 6 and learned how to write. But I've only written 4 novels, and they were all for young readers. And the first was Habibi, then Going, then The Turtle of Oman, and now The Turtle of Michigan. So I have always been primarily a poet from childhood, and I did write other shorter form prose work, such as short stories and essays, but I didn't think I could write a novel. So when I wrote the first one, Habibi, back in the 90s, it was kind of a miracle. I felt that I was even able to maintain my attention span that long, or have any plots whatsoever, because I think poets are people who don't generally like to have a plot very much. I always say we just like to stare at things and sort of meditate on them. But when you write a novel, of course, you need a little velocity and characters and some action, and yeah. So I'm very happy with the cover of this book, The Turtle of Michigan. I'm so honored, by the way, that it's a Michigan notable book. That means so much to me. But the artwork for both this book and The Turtle of Oman, which preceded it, was done by Betsy Peterschmidt, and I love her work. I think she's great.
Yeah, it is incredible. I mean, that was one of the first things is when, we received it as a submission, it just jumped out immediately because of the gorgeous cover.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And when she first did the cover for The Turtle of Oman in 2014, she was an intern at HarperCollins. And as far as I remember the story, she just volunteered and said, let me have a go at that cover, because other people, long professional artists, were painting turtles for us that all looked kind of mean and ominous. And we didn't want a mean and ominous turtle. We wanted a friendly turtle.
Right.
So Betsy pulled that one off. And then my editor, Virginia Duncan, tracked her down to do this book too. So that was very special.
Oh, that's really cool. I love it. Well, wonderful. I mean, you kind of gave us a little bit of background of your writing career, but how was your process? How did you become a writer? What was that?
Well, I became a writer, Mindy, by writing. I mean, I was always writing. I would keep scraps of bits and pieces of things that I was working on in shoe boxes under my bed when I was a kid, and go back to them. And as I grew up, I was a frequent writer. I've always believed in, the more you write, the more chances you have to write something that you really like. So to write on a regular basis has always been helpful to me. Whenever you can pull it off, like every single day. I'm an early morning writer. I'm an old-fashioned writer. I still like to write with pencil on paper or pen on paper, which was, of course, the first way I wrote, and then transfer it over to computer as the drafts go along. And I was never shy about sending out work. I started sending poems to magazines when I was 7.
Wow.
And it was my elementary school librarian, I lived in St. Louis at that time, who told me you could do that. I had never even thought about that. But she said, well, you could send to some of these children's magazines you like to read in the library. And that was how I started. I have worked with kids for next year. It'll be 50 years, amazing to me, encouraging them to share their work, and college students as well, and adults as well, and different communities everywhere. But I've always tried to demystify the process of writing. It's not a fancy art. It's a very elemental, almost primitive art, like scratching with a stick and your stone. And I loved as a child that it was a portable art, and also the cheapest art. Like I needed 25 cents worth of paper and pencil, and I could go.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's I think the process, if you keep it simple, keep it close to home, don't become too anxious about it, which I think many people do, especially adults.
Yeah.
When I have adults attend a writing workshop, they often preface their participation by saying, I'm not good at this, I can't do this. And I say, well, let's forget about that. I mean, obviously you have a desire because you came to this workshop. So let's work with the positive here. And
Right.
a lot to say. So, everybody's a storyteller. Everyone hungers for story and wants to feel story sort of taking us over, carrying us to another place. And it just seems like a very natural activity to me at this point. I find it hard to imagine how I would have lived without writing.
Yeah.
I don't think I could have. I don't know.
It's just, it helps you like just process the world to
Yeah.
get that emotion out there. And I love how it's such a discipline, because I've heard that it's such a common theme from all these authors, is
Yeah.
a routine of it. And that surprises.
Yes, and it's a discipline you love
Yeah.
that helps you do everything and anything else.
Yeah.
If you spend a little quiet time with your paper, then you feel, I don't know, recharged, and as if you're in contact. There's more of a flow between you and the world around you. So I love that aspect of writing.
Yeah, that connection.
Yeah.
I mean, I love that, because you're kind of talking about your writing process of being sort of an everyday thing,
Yeah.
and a little bit of why you write. You
Right.
have to.
And of course, as a poet, I would often ask people, we're going to think about your last day, yesterday and today, till then. So recent time. I bet there are 3 poems in there, 3 moments that could easily grow into little poems. And I think the same with stories. Every single day we live is filled with different stories, different chapters of stories, and just being able to welcome that and look at what happens as part of a longer story, or a story you could tell. I think writing gives us agency in some ways in the world, to believe that your perspective on a story matters.
I mean, is that kind of why you write? Is that agency?
Well, I think it becomes such a part of your identity if you've been writing all your life, that you just feel I feel very restless when I haven't written. I start feeling like a little anxiety comes to me, like, all these things to think about or do, and I need some quiet gravity time. And then when something starts opening up on the page in front of you that you hadn't really thought about in such detail before you started writing, that's a super fun part. It's exciting. And I've seen over these almost half a century, all these kids just, be resistant to their own possibilities of writing, and then suddenly just light up like a small torch of wondrous idea and language, and seeing how, just a few words can light a kid up. We have a 7-year-old grandson, and, just a couple of words put together can make him laugh. For some reason, last week, in some crazy sentence, I used the word stockpile. I don't even know what it was relating to. I can't even remember what was the context. And now he thought that was the funniest word I've ever heard. And he said, "What is a stockpile?" And then I tried to describe it, or what all different meanings it could have. And some intangible, like you have a stockpile of ideas or thoughts, or your closet is a stockpile of clothes, or your drawer or something. But he keeps, every time I see him now, he says, let's talk about stockpiles. And, it just, that's how kids are with language, a word, and he'll start laughing hysterically, like it's the funniest word in the world.
It's so true.
Yeah, and just recognizing that affection for a new word when you learn it,
Mhm.
and words that you love. Often I have kids just list words they love. I love the word meander. Like you
Ooh,
just go out to take a walk in your neighborhood and you don't have a direct agenda, but you're going to meander.
yeah.
Well, I'll turn when I feel like turning, and I'll go here. I don't know where I'm going.
Yeah.
And I think when we write, we meander,
Mhm.
and we travel through a story, and suddenly you say, okay, this is a street. I'm going to have something happen on this street, or let's
Mhm.
stop. Let's pause here for a minute.
Mhm.
So,
I love that.
thank
It's true, like
you.
the love of language.
Yeah.
And I mean, is part of when it came to your book, when it came to the Turtle of Michigan, where did that idea come from? Was it one of
Well,
those?
in this case, I mean, it's very specific because I had written The Turtle of Oman. And in
Mhm.
that book, I mentioned that the boy Arif is moving with his parents to Michigan. Um, when kids started really hounding me to write the sequel to the book, and it was the kids in North Carolina, especially because The Turtle of Oman was adapted or adopted for a project in North Carolina called Little,
Oh.
and that meant that thanks to some very generous philanthropists in that state, thousands of books were purchased and given away to all the kids of proper reading age. So many elementary schools were doing projects around the Turtle of Oman, and then a play was made out of the book, and I got to go over there and see the play 7 times and be with the kids in these large auditoriums, and it was just the most fun in my whole life. And those kids at the question and answer afterwards would say, well, you can't stop there. What happens when he gets to Michigan? Are the kids friendly in Michigan? What do the kids do in Michigan with him? We need to know, keep going. And so I promised them from the stage about the 6th session when they said this, okay, you guys are really putting this on. You're giving me an assignment. I'm going to have to try to do this. And also then the kids at the real Martin Luther King Elementary School in Ann Arbor, and I had visited that school twice in the past, so I knew what a multicultural school it is. They had a lot of Arab kids, Arab teachers, and they were so hospitable to me and to one another in that school. I just fell madly in love with it. A bunch of those kids read The Turtle of Oman, in which their school is referred to, that this boy is coming and he's going to go to that school. And they wrote letters, sent them to me as if Arif were a real person, telling me how they were planning to welcome him.
Oh,
That was so beautiful. It was like, this is immersion in their reading, that they're taking the story further and they're already leaving him a place at lunch.
oh,
So I sent some copies of those letters to my editor at Green Willow, and they put some of them on the Green Willow website. They got permission from the kids and the school to put some on the website, without the full names or addresses of the kids. And it was just such a gorgeous welcome. So once I started writing The Turtle of Michigan, and I started right before the pandemic started. So I had a lot of days at home to work on it. It became a real companion to me. I love Michigan. I've gone there so many times as a visiting writer over the years. The only 2 towns in the whole United States, other than the state of North Carolina, that have ever picked one of my books as a one book, one read town thing have both been in Michigan.
oh,
So I have deep experience in Marquette and Chelsea. And also having the most Arab Americans in Detroit, Dearborn has brought me up there to do community work so many times over the years, and to visit the Arab American International Museum, and all of their offshoot projects. And I've been to Arab American Studies departments at the University of Michigan, and just, I felt like I was kind of just somebody with a crush on Michigan. So it made sense that I had chosen to send the boy from Oman to Michigan because I
Mhm.
knew, but I also had met people in Oman when I traveled and worked in the school there who told me we lived 3 years in Michigan. Um, and we got our degrees, higher degrees there, and then we came back.
Mhm.
And so this seemed like, well, okay, I'm not just making this up. People do this, they've done it a lot of times. And so it's going to be Michigan. So I was very enthusiastic about, studying up on actual turtles in your state. I had
Mhm.
no idea when I started that there is a World Turtle Day in Michigan, in Ann Arbor. I did not know so much about Ann Arbor. I started ordering tourist bureau information and Googling, how Ann Arbor got its name and all these different things. And that was really fun
Mhm.
because I had to do research, and it's always fun to research something you love. So it
It's
was
true.
great. Yeah, it was really, really fun. Yeah, that's one thing I've always admired about librarians. You have all the access and you know how to research better than anyone else does.
Mm.
And it's just such a pleasure. You feel like you're feeding your soul.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
true. I mean, I always love it. It's like you're going on a treasure hunt. That's what I say.
A treasure hunt. Yes. Yes, yes. And I wrote to two kids I knew personally who were going to college at the university in Ann Arbor. And I
Mhm.
said, "Hey, what's a kind of ice cream that you have encountered in Ann Arbor?" So that comes into the book at one point, or where's a place you go to take a meditative hike in
Mhm.
Ann Arbor? And they just wrote me wonderful lists of things. And there were many things I couldn't put in the book, but it I could see how happy people are who live there.
Yes, I mean, it's a beautiful area.
Yes,
I We're not too far, so I always like to go when I get a chance, although
yeah,
I love my Lansing, East Lansing,
yeah.
gotta
I love
represent.
East Lansing too. I've been there. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Great, great time at the university there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love
Um,
it. This is a good kind of segue because you're talking about how your idea for the book, it's all these different influences, and then when you actually write the book, most people would say, oh, juvenile fiction, but there's so much going on in the book. There's emails, there's journal entries, there's lists. It's more than that. How would you define The Turtle of Michigan?
well, it's a book about change and accommodating change and making new friends and feeling a sense of comfort, regaining comfort in a new place.
Mhm.
And all of our lives are filled with change, even if we never leave our neighborhoods. Kids tell me, it's a big change to go from one grade to another grade in the same school. That is hard sometimes. Or, your friend moves away, or there's some change that impinges on your life, and you have to accommodate that. And so there was a sense of this is a book for kids, but adults are definitely part of the story. And the grandfather is my favorite character in both books, CD, the grandfather. And when I started The Turtle of Michigan, um, I didn't quite know what I was going to do with him. And I'm not going to tell, what I do with him in this book. But I didn't know, like, is he just going to be on the other end of an email, or are we actually going to go visit him, or how are we going to see him in this book? Because I wasn't willing to give him up.
No.
And by the way, The Turtle of Michigan was turned into a play too, because this book was adopted as a little read book this past spring, and it was fantastic. And the person who had played the grandfather in the first play was still available and played the grandfather in the second play.
Oh, I
So
love it.
that was beautiful. And just to see the characters on stage. Arif was a different actor and so forth. But it was phenomenal. I mean, to see a book you have written and text you have written as conversation turn up in actors' mouths on stage is definitely one of the most exciting things I've experienced in my life. And um, it was just beautiful. So, I felt like the story was unfolding for me too. I knew
Mhm.
it was going to take place primarily in Michigan, but I wasn't sure what was going to happen
Mhm.
when I started. And by the way, I did have COVID in the first draft of the book. I
Oh
put it in,
no.
but my editor, Virginia Duncan, wanted me to take it out. She said, I feel like that pins the book too closely to that exact year, 2 years, 3 years, however we're looking at the COVID pandemic. But so I took it out, and it wasn't too hard to do.
Yeah. And that is true. It does.
Oh, go ahead.
It does pin it to a very specific time, kind of takes
Yes.
the universality of it. Yeah.
Right. And she liked it better having a more wide open, that,
Mhm.
you know, a kid might read it in hopefully 5 years, 10 years, who hadn't experienced the pandemic, and it would just be like, we don't need that in here.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I agreed with her. She's much smarter than I am, so I usually agree with her.
Listen, a good editor is worth their weight in gold.
A good editor is the treasure of the writer's life. Yes,
Exactly.
without a doubt.
I mean, you'd kind of talked about your favorite character a little bit.
Yeah.
Are there any other characters you'd like to add to that list? And is there any specific pieces or events in the book that really resonate with you?
Well, you know, one thing that really came through in the play, I felt that I saw a little differently, but then I could see how it is in the book. And by the way, the plays were both done by Jonathan Ray, a great playwright of North Carolina. He wrote the text for the plays from the book. And was how at the beginning, the boy is the novice, like more anxious, more worried than his parents. And they're the confident ones, like parents as confident people. But as the book goes on, the boy becomes more confident because of his experiences with friends and his teacher. He has good teachers. And so at one point, I think it's the mother who says, you're doing even better than we are. And that was really strong when it appeared on stage. It was a very moving moment. And the boy looks stunned and very happy and proud when they say that. And so it's how children gain confidence, I think. A story of how we, you know, we have to be flexible to live on the earth and live in a body. We have to be able to accommodate all these different things that are going to happen or come to us. And so that was a sweetness that I felt emerging, but also the boy's sense of not having to worry about being different, because everybody's different. You know, all these kids are different. Every kid in your class is different, even if they all grew up in one town. They still have different stories. And so that sense of the growing awareness that, you know, our friends, they're not, we don't have to match.
Yeah.
And that's one thing, you know, actually in American society right now that I think adults could take a tip from. But in all the international schools I've visited in my life, and all the American schools in which there are students of so many different backgrounds present, you know, accepting, absorbing difference is simply one of the aspects of maturity and pleasure in one another's company. So I think it surprised me how much that started coming out in the book. Like he's aware of, you know, all these people of different backgrounds. And it's nice when he hears a little Arabic spoken in the parking lot, but he doesn't have to feel comfortable.
Yeah, I like that. And you mentioned a little bit at the beginning, but what do it mean for you to have your work selected as a Michigan Notable Book?
Well, it's huge, Mindy, because it suggests that someone liked your book. And I'm just like that little kid who was sending poems out to children's magazines who, you know, if a poem got published, you could have the fantasy that an editor liked it for a moment enough to take it and choose to put it in the magazine, but also the idea that some person you'd never met yet had liked something you had written down. That was just, it's like an ecstasy, just such a pleasure, and that sense of a kind of a chime among human beings, and we don't have to know each other in person. How writing connects us, but you know, to have this book honored in the state that it's set in means so much. And you know, I always hear about places in Michigan I've never been yet. Like everybody always talks about Traverse City and Empire. I've
Yep.
never been to either one of them. We have close friends who have homes in Empire, Texans, who go up there for the summer. And they're always saying, well, why don't you come? You'll love it. It's so beautiful. I know it's beautiful. I've seen their pictures, but I like thinking, okay, I want to go to, like as Atif does in the book, he wants to go to that island where there aren't any cars. And
Mackinac Island.
yeah,
Yes.
yes, I would love to go there. I do love the UP. I've gotten to drive around in, Upper Peninsula quite a bit. It's just amazing. And it's a secret place in the United States almost. The people don't even know how incredible it is. And so I think of Michigan as a place of many mixtures and beautiful fruits and cherries and trees and everything, but also the fact that so many Arab Americans live there has always made it be a place of it feels warm to me, to that such great people are there, and to have that sense of welcome in different communities. Yeah, I would love to come up to Michigan some summer and just drive around for a month without an agenda.
Yeah.
Meander around Michigan. I think nothing could be better,
Yeah.
especially since I have so much tourist brochures sitting in the filing cabinet from your state. But that would be really fun.
Yeah. Well, I mean, on behalf of the state, please come. We welcome you.
Thank you. So it does, back to your question, I'm sorry to meander from the question. It does mean a tremendous amount. And just to be honored by being on a list with other books in the state you're singing praises of and talking about it's a huge gift. Thanks.
Well, thank you. I mean, it was a gift to read your book. So
that's so sweet.
It was wonderful.
Very sweet. I have had some contact with a teacher at Martin Luther King since the book came out, and she has asked me some questions, and I sent her the teacher's guide, which was made for the Turtle of Oman. And because it was during the pandemic and people weren't going into work and staffs were short and everything, we didn't make one for the Turtle of Michigan in the same way. But, in the state of North Carolina made tons of curriculum suggestions for the book. So, you can dream up your own how to use a book. And I like in this book that it talks about poetry. And poetry being something that belongs to all the kids. And that was fun to write.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think that's one good example of why people should read your book is, that love of poetry and getting that piece.
Trying to be encouraging around the topic of poetry. Like, of course you can do it. You have thoughts, you can do it. Yeah, let's connect some thoughts that you might not even think are connectable, and you'll see where the poem is.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, why else do you think people should read your book beyond that love of poetry?
Well, whatever age we are, we're always making new friends, I hope. And to just retain an aptitude for doing that. Hopefully this book would inspire people to reach out and make some new friends, and also to explore within our own communities. I find that sometimes we become very humdrum about, like, we always go to the same restaurants in our community. We always take the same route when we're driving somewhere, but I always want to do it differently. Like, I want to go on a street I have never driven on. And in all these years of living in San Antonio. So, and I always want to go to restaurants I've never tried. So just to keep that spirit alive, even if we have never moved in our lives, even if we've stayed in place, that can kind of keep us in a more active sense of love and companionship with our places. I do really think that loving our places is part of how we help protect the environment, because when you love a place, you want to go take care of it. I mean, I pick up trash in downtown San Antonio for all my life, and I do it regularly. I have a whole collection of trash tongs and special bags and compostable bags and all these things that I use. But I love doing it because I feel like I'm loving my neighborhood when I do it. And just having kids grow up with a sense of affection for community, very important to me. And I used to have kids for years, when writing poems, write about their neighborhoods. And sometimes at the beginning of that, they would say, but this is a boring neighborhood. There's nothing in this neighborhood. But by the time we would finish our 6 weeks of writing about our neighborhood, they would say, whoa, this neighborhood is really more interesting than I ever knew.
Yeah.
And, we would approach it through characters, through history, through plants, through foods, all the things that comprise what makes up a neighborhood. And there's always more to learn. So I hope that the turtle of, I wrote this thing that in the very beginning, before the book came out, I started, my editor wanted me to write a little letter about it that was going to be given away at some, I don't know, book conference for teachers. And so she said, describe this book. And I wrote, it's a quiet book. Nothing horrible happens. No scandals, no melodrama. And, I'm a poet. I like quiet things. So it was nice to write a book, where there are some surprising friends, like the neighbor Hugh, I think turns up as a surprising friend for the kids. And just little things that occur during the story. The anti-bullying project that I placed at Martin Luther King is really something that happened at a school I visited in Indianapolis. And I was so taken by it that I thought, well, I'm going to pretend like it's happening at Martin Luther King too, for all I know it might be. I think I did look up, did they have any kind of attention toward, I don't think they have a lot of bullying there, but there was some kind of like club. And I thought, okay, well, let's just put this great club or great approach to bullying. And bullying is a serious issue. It's not something that I ever thought about when I was in school, although I have written one poem called Bully about, there was one bully in second grade who bullied everyone. And, retrospectively, my parents kind of forced me to befriend him. And then he never bullied me again personally, but I didn't think about bullying as like a huge problem in the world in those days. But now I think it's really a problem. And so I wanted to bring in little things like that once you feel more comfortable with the topic, that helps you make friends too. Well, that person is not like me and they were a little rude to me, but maybe we could be friends in the future. So, I just tried to weave things in that are part of our culture, part of our lives. There's a grade school in San Antonio I volunteer at sometimes where they have kids representing, I think it's like 42 countries and speaking 37 different languages.
Wow.
It's such an amazing school. And if I had to say one word walking to my car after a day spent there, it would be love. Teachers love those kids. The kids love one another. It's just love. It's pure love. They love to write. Even if they feel like they barely speak English well enough to write, they'll write in their original language. It's just an amazing public school. And that's, to me, that's the spirit of this whole nation. How this whole land was settled, and that brings up its own sadnesses. But I wanted a book about new friends in a beautiful new place, Michigan, my crush. And,
I think that should be our new tagline, Michigan.
My crush. Yeah, that would be my life. If I were in Michigan and had a license plate, I would want it to be Michigan is my crush.
Michigan is my crush. I love it.
A good one.
Well, and I always like to say, as a librarian, we always want to give as much, recommendations for more reading, more authors. So who are some writers, or what are some works you're reading now?
Right. Well, I picked out, I'm usually a person who has this bad habit of reading like 5 books at once.
No,
but right now I picked out one for adults that I'm just in love with. I love reading where people talk about their lives. This is a book by Dorothea Tanning, who was a painter and a poet. She lived to be 101 years old. I wish I had met her. She lived through the entire 20th century. It's called Between Lives, An Artist and Her World. And she was just such an exquisite writer as well as painter. She was married to the German painter Max Ernst, and she knew all the surrealists and all the painters of the early 20th century in Paris. They lived partly in Paris and New York City. I love this book. So I always urge kids, read books about other people's lives and see all the stuff they went through, all the things they did, because it'll help you have more ideas in your own life how to live. Because they did some really hard things and they were constant travelers. But I love this book, Between Lives. And I also love reading books in translation. This is a book by a Swedish author called I Miss You, I Miss You. This is for young adults, and it's by Peter Pohl and Kinna Gieth, Gieth. And it's translated by a terrific poet named Roger Greenwald, who lives in Canada. And he and I have been correspondents for years. I love his own poems. And when I was looking him up one day to see if he had a new book, I saw that he had translated this book, because he translates from Scandinavia, books from Scandinavia also. And so I wrote him and asked him about it. I said, I can't find it. And he found this used copy, I Miss You, and sent it to me. And it's about a twin whose twin is killed tragically.
Oh.
And it's based on a real story. So it's a mixture of fact and fiction. And the woman, Kinna Gieth, is the woman who told the story, wrote a letter first to Peter Pohl, P-O-H-L, and told the story. But it's filled with just love and connection of two girls to one another. And how is the surviving girl going to live when she misses her twin so much? And this book it's a beautiful read, and I'm reading it slowly because I've never been to Sweden, and the details about landscape and the school and everything is very powerful. But I'm reading all the time, and I love reading books for young people as much as, adult books. I always have one of those going too at all times. Yeah.
That makes sense. I mean, I feel like, especially working with children for as long as you have,
Yes.
that connection. Frankly, I'm like, when I was in college, I would just read children's books a lot because you're reading all these heavy works, and it was just a way to kind of, I don't know, be still, have some gentleness, have some like slow down.
Yes, to balance out all the harder texts you were reading. Well, that's the great glory in being a grandparent now and rereading children's books or reading new ones for the first time. So I have like 150, 300, I don't know, piles of children's books for my grandson, some that were his dad's and some that are, new books that came out since then. And we read all the time when he's here. So it's very special, and so special to see him able to read now too at 7, and asking more questions about words and stories.
That's so exciting, just opening that whole new world.
Reading as your life opens up. I mean, and remembering that feeling of, if you are a reader, your life will be so much bigger than if you are not. So that was my impulse as a child. I used to come home from the public library every Saturday with a stack of books this tall, and it was my wealth. It was my sense of treasure, was how many books did you have around you that you hadn't read yet or that you were in the process of reading. And I still feel that way.
I love it. Well, it was so wonderful to talk with you, Naomi. Thank you.
Thank you for your time, and thank you for your care, and love to Michigan. And I hope I get to meet you in person up there someday.
Yes, come to the Library of Michigan. We'd love to show you around.
I would love to come. I would be there in a jiffy. Yeah, thank you so much, and good wishes to you for the rest of the summer.
Thank you. You too, Naomi.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.